Hello everyone, today we continue learning Python and today we'll talk about property in Python. So let's start. But before we start that video, I recommend you subscribing to my Telegram channel. You will find lots of materials, modules, libraries, examples and tasks on Python in my Telegram channel. Also, I post all the announcements there, so if you want to understand what will happen to the channel in the near future, you can go here. And I respond to comments much faster than I do it on YouTube. So subscribe to my Telegram channel, link in the description down below. Well, first of all, I wanted to make a video on voice similarity score or something like that, but I don't really know much about that topic. So the next video is about voice score similarity or something like that. So okay, now let's talk about property. I'll read about score similarity and so on. Now let's talk about property, okay? And what is property? Imagine that you have a class, for example, person, and your person has name, which is a string, and age. Age, it's an integer. But we know that age should be positive, because that's the age of the person. And what we can do? We can create person, for example, object equals person, then assign object.age as 10, let's print it, object.age, let's run main.py now, as you can see 10. But also I can assign object.age as -10, and if I run it now, as you can see, -10. And that's a problem, because when we assign age, we should only accept positive integers. And what we can do in Python? Well, actually, we can create a function called setAge, as we do it in Java, for example. These are setters and getters. So setter in object-oriented programming, it's a function that sets a variable, sets the value of the variable. So as you can see, set_age, and we need to provide value right here. So if value it's the age we provide inside of that function. If value is more than 0, then self.age equals value. Else raise value error, so we'll raise an exception and we will tell that age should be greater than 0, like that. So what we have here? We have setAge function, and it accepts value. So if that value is bigger than 0, then self-age is, so we assign age as a value, but else we raise value error. So now if I would try to put object.set age as 10, for example, let's run it now. As you can see, my object age gives me 10. But if I would try to put -10, let's run it again. As you can see, age should be greater than 0. Actually, it solved our problem in some way. But there are two main problems. First of all, our code gets messy. Imagine that you have lots of numbers. For example, your identification number, I don't know, person's birthday number, and so on. And you should make lots of checks, lots of validations, like that one. And that's a problem, because you have lots of redundant functions in your code. That's one problem, because we cannot use object.age equals 10 as we used it before. And that's a problem, because if another person works on your code, it should understand that setAge sets the age, setName sets the name, and so on. That is messy. And Python should not be messy. I think you know that. And another problem is that we can still call object.age as -10. Let's run it now. As you can see, age is -10 because we don't use setAge function. Well, actually, we can solve that problem, but our code will get messy again. GetAge. GetAge, it's a function called getter. Getter, it's a function that returns a variable. So, getter and setter. I think if you know Java, C++, then you know about these functions. Okay, getter and setter. Getter gets the variable or the value of the variable, but setter sets it. And yeah, as you can see, now everything works. And if we want to access age, then we need to use getAge, like that. But still we can use object.age as -10. And in Python, if you want to create a private variable, you will be able to use it, and I'll show how. But if you want to create a private variable in Python, then you can put $_ before the name of your variable. Now self_age and return underscore h. So now, if I'll try to use object h, I'll create another variable. So as you can see, object.h is -10, but then object get h, and we'll have 0, because I just created a new variable called h, because we have double underscore h, not just the row h variable. And that's kind of solves our problem. But still, there are some ways we can put, for example, object.dictionary. So object.dictionary, these are all variables in your Python object. Let's remove that. Let's run it now. Oh, okay, not dictionary, but dir. Yes, dir, like that. Let's run it now, and as you can see, person h. So we can access that variable. And that's a problem because, first of all, our code is messy. Second of all, our code is messy. That's the biggest problem. Second of all, we cannot access our variables with simple object.attribute equals to x. We cannot do that because we need to call function. And all of these problems are solved by, and by the way, we can still access our attribute using underscore person double underscore h. That's double underscore before the variable is not the cure, like the real cure for the problem. We can still access that variable. But properties in Python solve all of these problems. So what is property? Property is a special class that defines how you set and get your object. It's just like setters and getters, but it's a lot cleaner. Okay, so let's remove all of that. And what I should do? I should create a property. So let's create a function define. Let's create, for example, oh yeah, we have h, but let's remove double underscores before the name, and let's assign h as property. Okay, and now I'll press Ctrl, and in PyCharm you can go inside of that class, inside of the function, and so on. So as you can see, property is a class. And we have what? Property attributes. fget, fset, fdelete, and doc. So f stands for the function. So function get, it's a getter. Function set, it's a setter. Function delete, deleter, and doc, it's just a doc string for our users. So what we need to do? We need to create, well, actually we can only assign one function, fget, and fset and fdelete and doc strings are optional. But what we need to do is, let's go right here. Yes, as you can see, fget none, or we can assign not only fget, but we can assign only one function we want. For example, if you want to only set your variable, you can assign fset. If you want to only delete your variable for some case, you can only assign fdelete. But most of the time, you will assign fget and fset functions. So again, fget function gets your variable, fset function sets your variable, fdelete deletes, and doc, it's a doc string. Okay, so I'll show every function today. What we can do? Let's create two functions before that h. Define h, or let's create get h, and let's return self.h, like that. And let's assign define set h, and let's get value. So these are the functions from the previous part of the video. If value is greater than 0, then self double underscore age equals value. Else raise value error. And I will not write anything because I think you understand what does it mean. Okay, and let's create double underscore age again. So you can say, wait, the only thing we did is we added our age property, and our code is still messy. Well, yes, I can agree with you, but let's go to our property built-in file. What we can see here, we can see typical use to define an attribute x. Class C from object. Okay, we do not inherit from object in Python 3. Define get x, self, return self x. So get x, actually you can call it get double underscore x, set double underscore x, is just the name. Return self underscore x. So underscore means that you can access the variable from object dot underscore x, like that. But double underscore, you cannot access it like directly. Okay, and that's the only difference. And as you can see, what we have here, we have three functions, and then x equals property from these three functions. So what we need to add here is h equals property from get age, because the first thing that we provide inside of here is our fget function, then set age, because the second thing we provide right here is our set age function. And now what we can do? Well, actually, you can forget about set age and get age functions. Why? Because now you can access your variable directly. So object.age, let's run it, as you can see, 0. But if I'll try to use object.age as -10, I'll receive value error. So actually, when you create a property, you use, so again, we use age, we go right here, and property will use set age to set the value. And we can have multiple checks in here, validation and so on. And as you can see, we validate that our value is greater than 0. If it's not, then we erase value error. And that's the most perfect part about it. So actually, our code is cleaner now. It's a lot cleaner now. And what we did today, or what we did now, we do not use set age or get age functions. We just simply assign object age property as -10. And even if we have lots of getters, lots of setters and so on, our user, our end user, who uses our class person, does not see that. The only thing he or she sees is object.age, object.name and so on. So only the value of the variable. And of course, if an error occurs, we'll have value error and so on. So that is the most perfect part about these properties. But actually, we can even omit double_age. It was just an example. So double_age is omitted, and now, as you can see, self-age tells us that everything is not alright, because if you can see, instant attribute age defined outside init. And actually, that's kind of bad, because if I try to put object.age before that, we'll have nothing. Self-age, well, actually we have our property, because as you can see, return self double_age, but person object does not has that double_age property yet. But if I'll create that property at first, but then I'll assign that age as 10, and then I'll assign object age, or I'll just call object age, so you understand what I mean. As you can see, what we did here, in object.age setter, so right here, we set our variable and we create it. And then we put object.age cannot be read. Excuse me, why? I don't know. Okay, but everything works alright. Maybe it's just a bug with PyCharm. Okay, so as you can see, in object.age we create our variable, and then in getAge we get the value back. But that's not very convenient, because most of the times you have default value. And to make a default value, what we can do is use define init function. Init function, and then instead of assigning self age, because you can have multiple checks, and if you just assign self age as 0, for example, or if you assign self age as -10, none of these checks will work, because you need to put to use set age function. But actually what you can do is directly use the property inside of the class. So as you can see, self age -10 in init, and now when I run, I will see the error self age -10 right here. But if I assign self age as 20, for example, and I'll print my age, but I will not assign it anywhere else. So the only thing I do is assign my age inside of my init function. Let's run it now, and as you can see, it's 20. So it all in init, it already has these checks, these validations, and so on, and it already executes all of them. So we do not get the age, we get that age property directly. And why it's beneficial? Because most of the times, again, what you have is name and age inside of your init function. So self name equals name, we will not have any checks for the name, and self age equals age. Now, if you'll use double_age, that may be a problem for you, because you have to run all of these checks in set age function. But if you just use age as a property, you already ran all of these checks. So as you can see, person now requires, if I run, it will say that init requires 2 positional arguments, and let's provide, for example, person j and age as 10. Let's run, everything is alright. So object age is 10 now. But if I try to put -10, as you can see, value error. So that is the most beneficial part about properties. But you can even make that code better. How? You can omit that line. So let's remove it, and let's change our code. First of all, what I'll do, I'll use Decorator Property, like that. And what is that? Decorator Property, it's a decorator for your functions. So what you do right here is you tell that property is for age. So that property creates an age property inside of your code. If I'll try to run it now, as you can see, can't set attribute. Why? Because we only assign property for our getter. But we try to assign our attribute, so set our attribute inside of our init. But again, if you use property and you put, what you do again, I think nobody understands. You put decorator property and then you create a function with the name of your property. So in our case, it's age. If I would name it age my, for example, or hmu, I will need to use hmu everywhere because that's how properties are created in decorators. So property decorator, and then instead of set age, because again, now we only have set age is just a function, but we only have age getter. When you want to create a property using decorator, you just put the decorator and then you create a function with the name of the property you want to have in your class. Again, if I would name it name, that I would have name property in my class. And as you can see now, age is just a variable, but name it's a property. Again, I name it age, and now we cannot assign our attribute because we only have property with the getter. But how we can make decorators work with fset function, so with setter? Well, actually, what we need to do is use age.setter, and then instead of set age, I'll just write age, like that, age.setter. So as you can see, what we do here, we create property, and we can assign age setter as age. Now everything is alright. Yeah, because we assign -10 right here, but if I assign just 90, for example, let's run it again, as you can see 90, everything is alright. So what we do, we create a getter for that property, so def age, the first one, def age, is a getter, but age setter, it's a setter, so you can create these things. But what if you only want to use the setter, for example? What you can do is use, for example, age equals property, like that, property, let's create that property, and then age dot setter, like that. And as you can see, now we can set our variable, but we cannot assign it. And what's the problem right here? Age cannot be set. Why age cannot be set? I think the problem is, unreadable attribute. So we can only set our attribute. I don't know why is that, because what we do is we create age property, and then only after that we assign our setter right here, but we don't have getter. If you want to use getter, then what you should do is assign age dot getter, define age, self return self _age, like that, and now everything is alright. Again, these are the ways of creating a property, and you can pick whatever you want, but you need to understand all of them. So property, when you just create property, you assign getter right here. So your property named age, and after that you can assign age.setter or age.deleter. Let's talk about deleter. Deleter is just a function that deletes, that is called when you delete your variable. So deleter, or no, we should actually call it age, like that. So as you can see, when I use decorators, every function I use with my property, I call age. And what I need to do here, for example, what if you open a file when your person is created? So the file for the person. In age deleter, what you can do is, for example, close that file or delete that file or do something like that. Delete self _age. And now what I can do, I can use delete object.age, and after that I can use print object. Let's print dir from object, and we will not find any age. So as you can see, there is no age. The only age is right here, but it's because we don't delete our property. So deleter is called when you delete your property. For example, print deleter. I don't really know an example because actually nobody uses deleters. Well, there are some moments where you should use it, but nobody uses them. So delete object.h. Let's run it, and as you can see, deleter. Yeah, that's it. So again, property, it's a very useful thing in Python. And you can call getter with property, setter with name of the property dot setter, and deleter with h.deleter. And actually what you can do in addition is put docstrings inside of here. So if you want to document your code, for example, h should be greater than 0, simple variable, and so on. And when a person calls help from your object, so help from object, for example, let's run it. As you can see, what we have here, h should be greater than 0, simple variable, and return. So so docstring, you put docstrings in your property getter, and yeah, those strings are just for help from object. So it's just a comment for other programmers. But what you should remember is that you have getters, setters, and deleters. And by the way, you only write docstrings in getters. So getter gets the value, and we should create it with property decorator and the name of the property you want to have in your class. And then we have setter that sets the variable, and you can have multiple checks and so on inside of here. And you have deleter, which is not very often used, but it is called when you delete your variable. That's it. So that is all. That is the most useful information about properties in Python. I hope you liked that video. Thank you for the watching, and good luck.